The following program contains graphic descriptions of the life of Muhammad. If you suffer from the notion that all religions are equal, this show might not be right for you. Check with your local imam.
Speaking the truth when others hold their tongues. Wrestling for justice with left-wingers and crocodiles. Resisting the temptation to keep the peace at any price. The host who has no equal. He uses sweet and low. Randall Terry.
What are you looking at?
Oh, yeah. I'd rather be a bookworm, baby, than to have my brains eaten by the worms of MTV, BET, Comedy Channel, and half the other garbage that's out there on television. Thank you. Welcome to the program, friend. We are in day 5, the final day of a 5-part series on Sharia law. I hope you've been enjoying it. If you missed any of this series, you can watch it online at terrycast.com. Simply click on one of the shows that begins at approximately 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, this is day 5 in a 5-part series on Sharia law where we kind of bring it all together. But before I do, I think it's only fitting that we hear one more time from my good friend, Jihad Granny.
Allah Akbar, good morning, boys and girls. What about Juan Williams? That infidel. NPR, fire that boy. Now, if only my boys teach him lesson. He feels nervous around Muslims. I feel nervous when justice of Allah fall down on him from heaven.
Welcome to the program, friend. This is the 5th and final episode on a special series regarding Sharia law. Is it incompatible with basic human rights? And if you have been following the series, you know that historically, for 1,400 years, and right now, in nations that have Sharia law, Islamic law, woven into their constitutions, you know that it is not only a threat to basic human freedoms, but that if it were to prevail, it would subjugate the entire earth under the iron fist of the crescent moon, Islam. I recently had a discourse with a young man who does a blog site, and he literally mocked the books that you see around me, because I challenged him, read books on history. He mocked the books, he mocked my exhortation to read books, and I was truly heartbroken for him. If we are going to prevail in the culture wars, he who reads leads. If we are going to steel ourselves against the steady encroachment and threat of Islamic Sharia law and of historic Orthodox Islam itself, we are going to have to read. We can't just get the data, even from watching television shows like this. And so, before I go any further, I want to encourage you, go to terrycast.com and read the piece there, Is Sharia Law Incompatible with Basic Human Freedoms? It's much longer than what we have here, and more importantly, it's well footnoted. And so if you want to do some research on your own, you can see the bibliography and you can learn what books to study from, which will have their own bibliography, and of course, you can go from there. Let's finish up with our 5-part series on Sharia law. This last episode is geared towards encouraging you on what we've laid out are 10 basic steps of what to do to inform yourself on the nature of Islam and Sharia law, and how you then can be an instrument to teach, to train, and to warn others. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the final segment, friend. Where do we go from here? Well, the point of this entire series is to introduce you to the concept of what would Mohammad do, to try and give you some of the learning tools to study Islam on Islam's terms, Now, we've gotten to the end of this series, and I want you to know this is a very focused series on a few aspects of Muhammad's life and Sharia law, and there's more coming. We will bring out at some point What Would Muhammad Do Part 2, or some continuing type of study for the West to look at Islam on Islam's terms as it applies to various aspects of life and politics. So keep your eye open for it. We'll see what it's called, but it will be available. So where do we go from here? Number one, show this to your friends. Why not? Loan it to someone. Tell them, hey, you've got to watch episode 3, or you've got to watch that section on the Sharia law. Whatever you think is going to really benefit people that you know, that you work with, family members, perhaps a Bible study at your house, or really a Quran study at your house, using this material. I want you to feel free to duplicate the printed material that came along with this. If you want to use it as study notes for the group, it might actually be less expensive for you to just contact us and order more copies. Either way, I want you to use this material for the good of your community. Number two, keep studying. Keep studying. We should not say to ourselves, hey, we watched that series. I wrote that series. I produced it. I'm an expert now, and really there's nothing more I could learn. No, we don't want to have that kind of an attitude. Keep going back to primary sources. For sure, buy and read the book by Ibn Ishaq, The Life of Muhammad. If you want to venture further, read Ibn Kathir. If you want to invest $700 or $800 or $900, get the huge series by Al-Tabari. Something that would be very beneficial to you would be to buy an inexpensive short history of Islam. There are a lot of them out there. Buy one that is written by a Muslim, and you can go to a bookstore and flip through them. Get one that has a section on a glossary of terms, because there are a lot of Islamic words that are starting to fly around, and a lot of people don't know what they mean and don't know where to go to find what they mean. So I encourage you, keep studying, get some of these books and these materials, get a short history of Islam. For sure, buy a paperback Quran and start to read it. And by the way, this is very important. When you read the Quran, you have to remember that the book is not in a chronological order. There's a short introductory surah or chapter, and then they basically go from the longest surahs to the shortest. So Surah 2 or chapter 2 is the longest one. But as you go through these surahs, they're out of chronological order, and you'll read them and you'll say, I don't get it. In this one, Muhammad says, kill people about their religion. But in this one, he says, there shall not be any compulsion in religion. Why does it seem like there's contradictions? It has to do with when the surah was given. You see, when he lived originally in Mecca and was preaching, he was converting 2 or 3 people a month, as I said. It's when the Hijrah began, when the Muslim calendar began, when they left Mecca and went to Medina and then started to use force, beginning with the raiding of the caravan and then with the big battle, the big first battle, the Battle of Badr. That was the beginning of the surahs, the revelations coming that called for violence, war, the use of the sword. So, if you're fortunate, you can get a copy of the Quran that in the study notes will tell you which of the periods of Muhammad's life are being dealt with in the so-called Quranic revelations. I'll be right back. And by the way, if you did not remember everything I just said, go to terrycast.com and watch the episodes.
Randall and I made a trip to Europe some years ago to visit Henry VIII. He told Henry that Anne Boleyn had a thing for him. The rest is history.
Moments with Moses. The Lord will send upon you curses confusion, and frustration in all that you undertake to do, until you are destroyed and perish quickly.
Welcome back, friend. Let's continue with what you can do to learn the truth about Islam and to be a watchman on the wall warning others. All right, number 3, jettison diversity training and political correctness. Just jettison it. The reality is this is probably the worst time in our history as a nation to study Islam on Islam's terms and then to address it forcefully, clearly, courageously. The words that we saw at the end of some of the episodes from John Quincy Adams or from Thomas Jefferson, you would not find an American president talking like that today. Diversity training, tolerance training has carved the guts out of people. And so really, in my opinion, this is probably the worst time in our history as a nation to have to defend ourselves against Islamic ideology and Sharia law and what would Mohammad do, because we have been so disemboweled by diversity training and all that comes with it that we're afraid of being labeled as intolerant or you're guilty of hate speech. Listen, defending yourself against a book that calls for you to be decapitated or crucified or murdered, that's not you being intolerant. That's you being smart. Number 4, exercise your First Amendment rights. Thank God we live in this country and not in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Egypt or any other Islamic nation, Sudan, Syria. If we were to say the words that we're saying in this series, simply exercising our First Amendment rights in those nations, we'd be dead. So exercise your First Amendment rights without fear, because if we don't use them, we're going to lose them. If through fear we bow our knee quietly to Sharia law, then where do we go from here? Use your First Amendment right. All right, number 5, pray and work to remove the sword from Islam. If nothing else, all of us can pray that the back is broken of Sharia law, which would basically mean just take the sword out. Islam is not a threat to us or to anyone without the sword. Muhammad said, Allah put a sword in my hand so that none would be worshipped but him. He admits this is a religion of the sword. It's his swords that are the great relics, the swords of the caliphs, his successors that are the great relics in Istanbul. If the sword is melted into a plowshare, if the sword is taken away, then Islam just becomes like any other religion, any other ideology. It doesn't produce fear and terror in people's hearts. So pray that the sword is taken away and begin to put a little bit of pressure on the State Department or on foreign governments. Phone calls, letters to their embassies saying, why don't you let freedom of religion happen in your country? Why do you suppress minorities? Why do you betray human rights? Number 6, fear not. Don't be afraid. Don't be fearful. Be courageous. But remember these words. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what's right in spite of your fears. People have lost their lives because of their boldness to say the truth about Islam. But Jesus said, don't fear him who can kill the body, and after that has nothing he can do with you. Fear him who can take your body, kill your body, and throw you in hell. That's God. In other words, fear God, Jesus said. Fear God. Don't fear man, because the fear of man brings a snare. All right, number 7. Remember, the gates of hell will not prevail. Remember that. The gates of hell will not prevail. Jesus said that to Peter. Peter, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Have hope. Remember, truth has within it the seeds of its own victory. Lies have within them the seeds of their own destruction. Remember, friend, if there's something you go, oh, I should have written that down, I forgot it. Go to terrycast.com and you can watch all of these episodes. I'll be right back. This is harder than it looks. I have no fear of the future. Let us go forward into its mysteries. Let us tear aside the veils which hide it from our eyes, and let us move onward with confidence and courage. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back, friend. I make no bones about it. I've got an agenda for your life. It's to turn you into a vibrant, passionate, courageous warrior for the truth. Keep watching this final episode on Sharia law, and hopefully it'll help turn you into just that, a warrior. Number 8, remember, you are part of the church militant. That means that at points you have to be militant. If you're alive and you're a Christian, you're in the church militant. Not the church squishy, not the church flabby, not the church surrendered, cowardly. You're in the church militant. Number 9, be calm, be instructional, be educational before you're an agitator. One of my staff keeps saying to me, tell people, look at the tone in which we've done this and have them try and imitate that tone. It's good advice. We don't have to be shrill. If we're too shrill in our study of Islam and what would Mohammad do and the danger of Sharia law, if we're too shrill, we'll be rejected by virtue of our shrillness. Be calm as you learn. Be calm and reasoned as you instruct others. Don't overstate. And if you say things calmly, the truth is so horrific, you don't need to say it with a shrill voice. And then finally, number 10, begin the discussion about Mohammed. What would Mohammed do? In the West, in this generation, most scholars, most policy analysts, most people in our government, certainly our presidents, have missed the basic question. What would Mohammed do? The crisis that we're facing with Islam is not that a group of radicals hijacked a peaceful religion. That assertion is simply not true. In the life of any reasonable study on the life of Mohammed, it's ludicrous. The statement is ludicrous. So begin the discussion. Urge your friends, study Mohammed. Go to the magnificent compendium put together by the by USC, University of Southern California. That compendium has the main hadith texts in a format that you can study for yourself. It's a great, great source, a great service that they've done for all people who want to study the hadith and the sunnah of Muhammad. And that's it. Be brave, be bold, pray, read, talk, share this with people. And let's pray for the speedy day when the sword is taken out of Islam's hand. And then, by the kindness and grace of God to the whole human race, it will no longer be a threat to our lives, our bodies, our consciences, and our souls. God bless you. Where do we go from here? Well, if you forgot, go to terrycast.com. These episodes will be there in the archive section. I'll be right back. They sacrificed their sons and their daughters to the demons. They poured out innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. John Quincy Adams said, as the essential principle of his faith, Muhammad's faith, is the subjugation of others by the sword It is only by force that his false doctrines can be dispelled and his power annihilated. John Quincy Adams is basically saying, listen, it is the sword that propelled Islam to where it is, and the sword must be taken out of its hands. As I have said throughout this series, without the sword, Islam dies of its own weight. I urge you to get the 10-part series, What Would Muhammad Do?, and begin this journey of making yourself an expert on Islam. God bless you.